Hello, Planeswalkers. Welcome to our 6th episode of our podcast, The Lotus Archives. The name's Kava, and I am here with Jack today, as always.
Hello, everybody. How we doing?
And today, we are going to do something a little bit different. We are talking about deck building. Yes, you heard that right. Deck building. And as the title suggests, deck building for dummies. We're going to take a brief dive into the wonderful world of deck building. And as I'm sure Jack will tell you, there is plenty of different nuances in deck building. So, Jack, where would you want to start with this?
So I mean, out of our past episodes, we've been talking a lot of like the different archetypes, the different strategies, and kind of like, different ways that you could build the deck towards. But I think the best way to start would just be like picking that theme, right? Like where you want to start. It's like if you're building anything, you're building a building, you're building up anything, you start at the foundation, right? The kind of cornerstone of what you want to go into. So I think the theme of it is kind of the first step. Right, it's like, what do you want the deck to do?
Okay, so obviously we talked about all the different generic themes in the past couple episodes here. But once you get that theme dialed down and you kind of have an idea of the type of deck you want to build, where do you go from there?
So, I mean, you got plenty of different sources to go into, lots of different ways you can look at it. I know for me personally, I use EDHREC a lot if I'm looking for certain cards. But mostly what I'll usually do is, you sit down, you kind of figure, okay, this is what I want to build the deck around, this is what I want to do. And then you really want to go into, like, kind of like the statistics of it, right? You want to see how many lands should I have in it, how many pieces do I need to run of my theme. And, you got stuff like interactions, like targeted removal, things like board wipes, counter spells if you're in blue, and just kind of going into the nitty gritty stuff of like what will make the deck tick.
Okay, so now that we got the theme and we know all that shit, what would you say is the next step on trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to build this deck now? Like, do you start with going with your win cons? Do you start with your creature cards? How do you go about this?
I would say like the win con should kind of be like your main theme. It's like, the win con is kind of what you want the deck to build up towards, right? So like if we take a tribal deck, for instance, pretty standard, simple. I want to play a bunch of, say goblins, right? Like say you want to build a goblin deck, right? So your theme is just pumping out as many goblins as possible, hitting the board, swarming the field with all of them. So essentially you just want to fill the deck with as many goblins as possible, and pretty much that's like your main goal. So then from there, what you typically want to do is kind of look at, okay, which goblins should I play? How many do I really need in the deck for a tribe? And then you go into like your land count. You can get down to gritty of like artifacts, how many mana rocks, the ramp, what does all that stuff look like? And to get those, as I mentioned, I usually use sites like EDHREC is a really good one. Like if I can't think of a card, or if I know I don't own a card and I want to see where it's at, I'll usually go to that site, and that'll kind of give me an idea of what exactly it is to get to, or like what exactly I would want to, because even with all the years I've been playing, there are still cards that I don't know about. Cards come out all the time, new sets, new prints, and it's tough to keep track of it all. So,
oh my God,
I usually just go to right, like keeping track of everything is.
I mean, Christ, it's horrible. I try staying up on top of the recent set releases,
not easy.
Especially recently. It seems like we're getting a new freaking set every other week, almost.
Yeah, like every few months, it's like new spoiler of this. Like we just had Outlaws not that long ago, and now all of a sudden we have Modern Horizon 3.
Yeah.
And then we've got like Assassin's Creed shit coming out, and we got all this other crazy cool stuff. So it's like, yeah, keeping track is hard. I mean, EDHREC is,
Yeah, I mean, Christ, I'm still sitting on 2 boxes that I haven't even opened yet and pulled cards because I've been too focused on other shit. And I have a box of Thunder Junction and a box of Murder at Karlov Manor. And part of me doesn't even want to open the Karlov Manor because I'm not really looking for anything in that set. Just happened to get one. I think one of my buddies bought it for me. But I'm like, I don't even know if there's any good cards even in that set that are even worthwhile to be looking for, or if I should just leave it sealed. So if any of you guys have any thoughts on that, let us know. But back to main topic here. So
Right. So like, I mean, usually, have you ever use EDH Rec?
oh,
Quite a
all the
bit,
time,
right?
all the time.
Yeah. So like that's. I mean, you can get like if you're confused on like statistics of like, so now we're talking like how many lands, how many creatures, and we'll go over that stuff too. But like, that site does have, and it's one I used before to get started when I swapped over from, my Legacy days to Commander. It was a whole different ballpark. So to really get my feet in the door and start with it, when I made that swap to this format, EDH Rec was my best friend. Like, I use that shit constantly.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, the only downside about EDH Rec when you're looking up decks is they don't really do a good job of showing like how many lands you should be running, because obviously, as you know, it all depends on what creatures and what spells you end up putting in there. Because me and you both have a Miram deck, for instance, and they're built very differently, and your mana base is gonna be different than mine. And
Actually took apart my Miram deck.
oh, you took it apart.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so sorry folks, my Miram deck no longer exists. I turned it into Karthus, which then, now that I bought that graveyard, the new graveyard deck, the Karthus mana base is now going into the Jund graveyard deck. So now Karthus itself doesn't even exist anymore. So I don't have dragons anymore.
Ooh.
Sorry, bud.
But you get exactly what I'm saying, because
So like 2 decks can have the same theme, but like, I mean, you could have 2 dragon decks, you could have 2 elf decks, you could have 2 goblin decks, but still be tailored in different ways. Although I would argue that like the number of creatures and like the base stats could probably still be the same kind of across the board, or at least I would argue that they should be.
yeah, they're probably gonna be roughly the same, and it's all gonna depend on the style that you want. Because I know you can go a pure goblin tribal, and have 35, 40 goblins in there, or you could switch it up and have goblins as the sub theme and have more of a artifact style goblin deck, and you're gonna have a lot less goblins in there than you would the person that's taken the pure creature style deck.
So like in that sense, how many artifacts would you say you would probably want to run in that?
In my dragon deck or in
well, like
goblins?
in like, so like say you want to build like the Doretti Planeswalker.
Oh god.
That was in the pre-con, right? So like how many artifacts? So like if we're building an artifact themed deck, right? And we're kind of getting the stats of that. How many artifacts would you put into an artifact deck if you were building, say, Doretti?
Oh god. Well, in my opinion, you need at least 30. If you're focusing on artifacts, you want right around 30. I know I have the Doretti deck pulled up right now, the pre-con, and they listed at about 25.
It's about on average, I would say, yeah. But you can upgrade that for sure.
Yeah, I know for me personally, I definitely go higher on my theme cards.
Yeah.
And like with Doretti, especially that one of his main abilities is sacrifice an artifact.
Yep, so he does a lot of that recycling.
You want to have a lot of artifacts.
Yep. I think with that one, yeah, like his goal is you put artifacts in the graveyard and then you kind of like, it's like a junk recycling thing, isn't it? Where
yeah.
Swapping them all around.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, Doretti Scraps Savant, for those that don't know, is a 3 and a red planeswalker that can be your commander. His +2 ability is discard up to 2 cards and draw that many cards. His -2 is sacrifice an artifact. If you do, return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And his -10 is you get an emblem with whenever an artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So, like with a card like Duretti, I'm making sure all my lands are artifact lands as well. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of them out there that, like, I was just going through all my land base here that I have in my collection, and I was looking, and I was kind of shocked at how many lands that actually have artifact in front of them there. Because I was like,
There's
yeah,
a pretty good number.
yeah,
They printed a bunch.
yeah, because I'm looking at them like, wow, this land is kind of shitty. It's just a land, basic land, and I actually read the card more, and I'm like, oh, it says artifact.
Yep.
Those return target artifact cards, you could pull land cards out of your graveyard now.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's very good. So like yeah, so depending on what theme you're going for and what you want the deck to do, that can really kind of impact what your stats are going to look like. Right? So like, so cards for a certain theme built around like artifacts, creatures, stuff like that. You would want to go into the 25 to maybe 30 range of doing what the deck wants to do, right? It's like, hey, I want to do this thing, and you want to try and do it as consistently as possible. So I would say having that number there is good for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'd go less than 25, but
No.
especially with your core theme of the deck.
Right.
I mean, 25 I definitely think would be pushing it on the lower end, depending on what the deck actually does.
Right. So, like, if you were to move on to other stats there as well, like lands, for instance, right? So, like, let's see, how many lands do you typically run in your average deck?
I run anywhere between 30 and 40, depending on the deck and how many like mana rocks and ramp I have in that deck. Like for instance, in my Miram deck, I do run 35 lands, which for being as it's such a high creature heavy deck and a lot of those creatures are very mana intensive, some may say it's fairly low, but I also have a lot of ways to bring down costs for those creatures.
Right. You run like an Urza's Incubator?
I don't in that deck right now. It
Okay.
will be in there very soon. I'm trying to find one currently. But like I got cards like Scaled Nurturer. I got, let's see, Rattleclaw Mystic. Thrakkus doesn't do anything for that. But Dragonlord Servant. Then I got Minion of the... Nope, that doesn't do that either. I'm reading these things wrong.
There's the shit. What the hell?
Dragon Speaker Shaman.
Yep,
That's the one I was looking at.
Yep.
But then I also got cards... Let's see... Boom, boom, boom... cards like Lurking Predators.
Mm-hmm.
That whenever an opponent casts something, I can just put a creature card right onto the battlefield from my hand. I have ways of getting around different casting costs. Personally, one of my favorites that's somewhat new is Monster Manual from the Baldur's Gate set. I mean, Christ, just for a 1 and a green, once Monster Manual is on the field, 1 green and a tap, and I could put a creature card from my hand onto the battlefield. That's an easy way to cheat in creatures. And right now, that card's only like $7.
It's very good.
But
so yeah, I mean, I typically run around 30. The hell did I say? Like 36 on average, maybe 34.
yeah, I mean, I know for me, when I'm looking at lands, I lands. It's something that I still struggle with to this day, trying to discern my
It's
mana
tricky.
base because there's a lot of different thought processes on land bases and mana base, and everybody you talk to that's been in the game for a while is gonna have a different opinion on it. Um,
Oh, for sure.
like for me, I look more at my mana curve as opposed to what I got. I look at the mana curve that I take all of the red pips, all every colored pip. I look at them all and I see, okay, how many do I have? And that's where I start building my mana base. And I see, so I have 10 blue pips.
Yep.
Okay, well those 10 blue pips might be a one blue pip on one card, yada yada yada. Well, with that, I then take, okay, well, I need at least 10 islands. And I go on from there, and I do a lot of playtesting, making sure the deck actually functions the way I want it to. And then, of course, you got cards like Sol Ring and Birds of Paradise and Arcane Signet, and cards like that, Mana Rocks, that are going to help bump that up a little bit. Where, okay, well, instead of adding this land, I got Birds of Paradise, which is acting like a land and it's still a creature as well. So you got a bunch of different stuff like that. Um, I'll let you take over for a little bit here as I catch my
Yeah,
thoughts.
like when it really comes down to statistics and stuff like that, it depends on what your deck really wants to do and what you're trying to go for. Like, if I briefly touch on my elf deck, right? So, I have the list pulled up here. So, one thing I will mention, a site I started using, Architect, which me and my play group started going with, is a really great way to kind of build up a deck before you buy it. In a sense, like, it's a really cool site to use where you put everything in. You don't have to own the cards. You can have, like, a set list you wrote down on some paper to try to, like, figure it out. And then you can put all the cards in here, build the deck up, you can play test it a little bit, and you can see all the stats on there, and it prices everything out for you, too.
Yep. I know
So,
Moxfield does the same thing.
Moxfield does the same, yeah. Which
I'm a
I've used
huge
Moxfield a little bit.
Yeah, for me personally, I'm a huge proponent of Moxfield. My entire collection's on there.
Yeah.
But I've used Architect a little bit. I just liked
It's
Moxfield
really
set
cool.
up a little bit better for my uses.
Yeah.
But I've used Architect before, and it's not a bad site at all, and it does a
Oh,
very
I know.
good job.
It's got a nice public thing to it. So, like, you could even go on and you can view other people's decks. So, if you were to actually go in and you want to find an elf deck, which I have on here called Elves to the Max, is what I decided to call it. I couldn't
Oh
really come up with a
God.
very clever name, so I just called it that because that was the first dumb thing that popped into my little brain. So if you want to go in there and you want to view my deck, you absolutely can. And you'll see that I only run 30 basic forests. That's it. I don't run any fancy non-basics. I don't run anything crazy. It's just 30 straight up forests, and that's it.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, if you go on Architect and you pull up, you just search elves. Jack's deck is the very first one right there.
Oh, is it really? The
Elves to the
Elves to
max.
That's
That's the one with your
hilarious.
Azuri, right?
Azuri Renegade Leader is my
Yep.
commander, yeah. So there you go. So for anybody looking to build up a cool elf deck, it shows you. Does it show you the price of the deck and everything like that?
It shows me the price of the deck about $418.
Yep.
Oh,
So the deck isn't
I like that they have a salt sum on there.
Oh yeah. So Architect will show you kind of like a rough estimated salt sum, which is kind of like how annoyed certain players get at certain cards, and I can already tell you that Triumph of the Hordes is probably the saltiest one on the list.
Oh man, I love Triumph.
Yeah. So
That's
like,
my go-to card in green.
yeah. So I mean, so this site really is a cool way to kind of like build up a deck that you want to play and kind of see where it's at and get a rough estimate. You can have your friends look at it too, and you can all post them up to like Discord or whatever and see where they're at. It's a really cool, fun way to just kind of get everything in front of you, you know?
Oh
So like, you
yeah.
can see the statistics of it,
I mean, the one
and you can see
thing.
the curve too,
Oh
which the
yes.
curve is the really important part
The one
that
thing looking
you
at
can touch.
compared to Architect and Moxfield, the
Hmm.
one thing that Architect has on top of on Moxfield is the the deck stats.
Yep.
So
Which I love these here. So you just click on stats and it shows you uh, all your different like mana curve, which that actually took me a while to figure out myself was the mana curve of a deck
yeah,
to
like
really get that down pat.
I know Moxfield has mana curve as well.
Yep.
Moxfield obviously breaks down into the different creature or different spell categories, so artifact, creature, yada yada yada,
Yep. This
and
does the
card
same.
types. The one
Yep.
thing Moxfield doesn't do is the subtypes.
Yep.
Easily, that is. You can go around and play around with stuff in Moxfield to get it set up to show you the subtypes, but
Right.
it's you gotta automatically just go and change one of the settings, and then it'll show you the subtypes. Like looking at it right now, Jack's uh, elf ball deck here. He runs 39 elf creatures.
Yep.
My dragon
There's
deck,
41 total.
yeah. So 39 of those creatures are elves.
Yep.
But then it breaks it down druid,
Yep.
ranger, scout, shaman, warrior.
Yeah. Whatever.
So
Yeah.
I guarantee some of those elves are shamans, or are warriors, or are druids.
Yep.
And
A lot
like,
of them are druids.
yeah, then like I can look at mine and I break it down. I have 25 different dragons in my Miram deck.
Which that's pretty on point for a dragon deck,
Oh
as
yes.
you want to have more support for the dragons to kind of come out and do their thing, and they have really solid support base of non-dragons to kind of help them get
Oh
their steam
yes.
going. Whereas with the elf deck, I mean, elves have been around for so long, so have dragons, but like
I mean,
the elf
elves are,
tribe
yeah,
is it's absurd. You
they're
know,
one of
you
the
play,
originals.
yeah, like they're right on par with goblins and merfolk.
Oh yeah.
And
Speaking of
like the
Merfolk,
curve
that's the
of
deck I want to make.
yep, I had a merfolk deck I thought about putting up in here, but yeah, it's like looking at curve, looking at the stats, you can see like. Well, so like maybe we can try to like explain mana curve a little bit, because this one
Okay.
actually has a pretty good way of explaining mana curve. So it's basically the average mana value of the non-land cards in your deck. So like what this is that it helps you it shows you on a nice little graph here how many 1 drops, 2 drops, 3 drops, things like that, and it shows you on like this nice little line of kind of like the upscale and downscale of where your deck is at. So like too many of a higher cost, right? If your deck is really top heavy, right? Well, like dragons,
Dragons.
right? Exactly, right? Like dragons are very top heavy. They have a lot of high cost cards. So what you're going to want to do is offset that with a lot of low costs to ramp you out, right? I'm sure you got a lot of um, like cheap ramp spells like cultivates, rampant growth, explore, shit like that, probably. Kodama's reach.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, so like you have some like nice little cheap things there that can support you, some early game stuff, because you don't want to just sit there play land after land, waiting to get to like 6, 7 mana to play a big dragon, and that's all you've done that turn,
Oh
right? You
god.
don't want to do that. So
No, I mean half the time when I'm playing my dragon deck, I am hoping because how I have my dragon deck built right now is I purposely didn't put any tutors in that. I didn't put a lot of these other mean stuff that I could have that I
hmm
wanted to. I chose not to because I didn't want to be that asshole that came with my Miram deck, and
right,
by turn 3 or 4, I was dropping frickin' huge dragons and getting 5 or 6 of them out at the same time. So, like for me, I have a lot of lower cost uh, creatures in that deck So I got cards like Birds of Paradise, which is a 1 green. Everyone should know what Birds of Paradise is. It's one of the original
Yeah,
ramp cards.
yeah, early mana dork. We
Then you
love
got,
birds.
oh yeah. Then I got a card like Minion of the Mighty, which is from the Baldur's Gate set. For those that don't know, it's a red pip for 0/1 Kobold with Menace. Whenever Minion of the Mighty attacks, if you attack with creatures with total power 6 or greater this combat, you may put a dragon creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. That's fucking disgusting.
Yeah,
Especially
really
in a deck like Dragons. But then, of
Yeah.
course, I got cards like Dragon Lord Servant. That's going to help cheat out dragons for a little bit cheaper.
Yep.
I got smaller cards like Corlessa Scale Singer, Rattleclaw Mystic, Reckless Barbarian. I got Scale Nurturer in there, Dragon Speaker Shaman. I got a bunch of stuff. I mean, I will
A lot of
say,
good support.
oh yeah, a lot of great support for not only ramp, but dragons as a whole.
Yep.
I will say there is some creature or dragons in there that I'm probably going to be changing out because the more I played this deck, the more I realize, okay, this doesn't do as well as something else could have for a cheaper mana cost. For example, I got Earthquake Dragon in there. It's a badass dragon card,
Yeah, I really like I
but
love that one. It's a really good one.
it's great. I mean, it's for 15 total mana cost. It's a 10/10 with flying and trample.
It's insane. It's so good.
But the caveat with it is the spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total mana value of dragons you control. So I could literally just have 2 or 3 dragons on the board, and the mana cost for Earthquake Dragon is just 1 green pip.
Yep.
So
I've had that happen a couple of times when I used to play Miram.
oh
I'd be
yeah,
able to drop him down like maybe by turn 7, I could play him for probably 2.
oh yeah, exactly. It's crazy. But like for me, my main thing with this deck is I wanted stuff that I could play early on that's going to help me build up and get those big boys that I like playing so much. So, of course, I got cards like Sol Ring and Arcane Signet in there because
Yep. Yeah, that would be the next step. They'd be like, so you want mana rocks, right? Like most decks would typically want a good slew of mana rocks, as opposed to like utility artifacts,
Yep.
right?
So, I honestly don't run as many as I should in my Miram deck. I only run Soul Ring and Arcane Signet in here. But I purposely tried to slow this deck down a little bit because when I first built this thing, she was a lot faster. And
Yeah.
my one buddy looked at me and he pretty much just told me to go fuck myself because I had
Yeah.
Miram out on, it was like turn 3, I want to say.
Yeah, that sounds
Um,
about right.
And he pretty much just looked at me. He's like, "Yeah, no, fuck you. That's fucking disgusting." Because with Mirror Mountain turn 3, I was getting double of every dragon, and then I could easily just put on Mirror Box and Panharmonicon and all my other fun shit that I like doing with this deck. But
Yep.
with the artifacts, I mean, yes, you want mana dorks and you want mana rocks. How many mana rocks would you recommend the average deck run, Jack?
So yeah, so like that's kind of that interesting. It's not so much a dilemma. It's kind of just like finding that balance between artifact cards that support your theme and do what you want to do in the deck, and then mana rocks to kind of help you get to where you want to get to. So in this case, it really depends on the style of deck, and usually I even kind of look at it as like the color, right? So like if I have green, right, and say an elf deck or something like that, I'm gonna opt for more ramp in the form of like cultivate, where it grabs you lands to put onto the battlefield and put into hand. Like I'm gonna look for things like that, as opposed to arcane signets, Rakdos signets, things like that, or like the like command sphere,
Yep.
or like just any kind of mana rock, right? And elves has this whole other thing with mana dorks, where like elves are very, their whole thing is that they make mana themselves. Like I've got at least maybe 10 or so elves out of the 30 I run, where they're all like tap for mana.
Oh, without
Like
a doubt.
each of the elves, they do their things. That's a very unique case in like why I only run 30 lands, why I only have Soul Ring. That's the only mana rock is Soul Ring.
Yeah.
Just because it's Soul Ring, you always run Soul Ring. Step 1 in deck building, get a Soul Ring.
And I would say a close next step is grab yourself an arcane signet.
Yeah, Soul Ring and Arcane Signet are typical must-have. Again, my elf deck, very niche case of why you wouldn't run an Arcane Signet, but that's out in left field.
Yeah, and I would say any deck...
Monocolored decks.
Yeah, any deck that's more than 2 colors, you need to run an Arcane Signet.
Yeah, like 2 and more, it'll help you out in mana fixing, which is like, just making sure you had all your colors on board to get you there.
So I have... So the Great Command Zone came out with a new template a couple years ago here. And that template is how many cards per like typo that you should be running. And they're saying that for ramp, you should have 10 to 12 cards that can help ramp you. Yep. You should have 10 cards that help enhance your card draw.
Yeah, card draw is a big one.
Yeah. Then 10 to 12 cards for removal. And 3 to 4 cards for mass removal. Now, removal...
I know they've been fluctuating with that.
Yeah, because they used to say 5 for each of the removals. That's something... I think it's going to depend on your play group.
It really does, because there's, we're seeing a lot of influx of ward, right? So, at least in my play group, we've got, at least, 3 to 4 of our decks collectively, the commander has ward of some type.
Oh, yeah.
When I was playing Miram, it was, 6 of our things all had ward. So, with all these really good cards coming out, and all these good commanders that just have this innate protection, it becomes less relevant to be able to single target, interact on those, and having that extra board wipe. I know I've seen Josh Lee Kwai mention this a lot of times, where he's just like, yeah, I actually run 1 additional board wipe just so I can make sure I have something to answer these crazy ward creatures, because they're just becoming so relevant.
Oh, yeah, and it's one of those things to piggyback off of that.
Yeah.
When you're sitting down... I know I have certain decks that I only play with certain groups of people. Because I've had these decks built to combat, one of their better decks. Or, one of my good buddies. He has a very... Well, at the time, it was a very good colorless Eldrazi Titans deck. I haven't played it in a while against him. But I have a deck built that pretty much... At the time, when I first started learning, I built a deck that pretty much shut down his deck. And
you're trying to compete and,
rise
to that challenge.
I did it just to be a deck.
Well, yeah.
But I wouldn't play that deck against someone that's running mono green elves, because it wouldn't do what it was supposed to do. So I guess now when I'm building my decks now, I try and go for a more generalized approach, just because with my work schedule and just life in general, I'm not able to sit down and play with the same group of people once a week or once a month. As much as I would love to, it's just not feasible, especially since being in the restaurant industry, my weekends are Monday and Tuesday. Most people are working on Monday and Tuesday. And So for that, I generally end up just going to a local game store. On There's one up by my house that does Monday night Commander night, and I end up going up there maybe once a month. That way, I can get some Commander in and play a couple games. And because of that, I've been starting to build my decks a little bit more tame in terms of, okay, well, this commander is popular right now. Let me throw a couple cards in a deck that's going to be able to combat that. Especially once, like, artifact style decks had a resurgence in Brothers War.
Yep.
Like, I used to not run many artifact removal spells and shit like that in my decks because none of my buddies played them. And they had the resurgence, and I brought one of my decks, and I hadn't updated it in a while, played it, and I realized, shit, I have no way in this deck to stop this guy. And I sat there, and I was not able to do anything the entire game. And I didn't want to do that anymore. But having a play group, like I know you have a fairly consistent play group, Jack. So
Yeah,
you
we meet up usually about every week or so.
Yeah, and I know you probably build your decks a little bit differently because you know how your play group is going to play.
Yep.
So,
yeah, we all know our decks pretty well, and we kind of build up our stuff in certain ways. It's been a really interesting dynamic to try to get our, I want to say, like, not so much power levels, but just like consistencies and speeds of how the decks operate and how quickly they can get their wins up, because that's kind of a huge thing to consider with deck building, is the group you're in the most and like who you play with regularly. What that dynamic looks like can affect what types of cards you put into the deck.
oh, without a doubt. Especially if you have a play group that doesn't like Infect.
Which is why my Infect deck rarely sees the light of day.
Oh, man.
But even like this Elf deck, right? So like this one in this play group is seen as one of the more... we kind of just do it as like how close to CEDH, like the competitive end of EDH, like how close to that threshold are we when we're building this deck, or when this deck plays, how close is it to that? And this deck is almost like it's right on the border. Like this thing is almost as close to CEDH as I've gotten when building a deck. And the reason, like it's a really funny reason for that, but like this one, my thought process with elves, which I guess we can go into that since we're talking about like dynamics and how we built the deck and why we built it.
Oh, yeah.
Given my history with Legacy and Modern and growing up playing in these highly competitive formats, that's all I knew with deck building, right? I didn't start building Commander decks until maybe like 6 or so years ago when I was in college. So all my decks I built previously were 60-card, highly competitive Legacy decks, and that's all I played against for the longest time. For like the majority of my time playing Magic was just spent on that. So when you spend that much time playing in that format, your brain gets centered into, okay, I gotta play meta, I gotta play what's good, I gotta play this, and this of this type, I gotta do deck searches, I gotta see what's come out, what's new, what's this, and you get so hyper-focused in needing to play the best possible thing you can play that it's not a social game, right? You're not cared about, you know, what your opponent's doing or like how they might be interpreting the board state or anything like that. You just want to win.
Oh, exactly.
So, yeah, it was a big struggle with that to try to get myself out of that and actually start caring about what my opponents were. You know, I had to start caring how the social dynamic worked and if my friends were having as much fun as I was playing the game.
Oh, you mean like the first time I played against you, and we told you we were playing
the elf deck?
Yeah, and we told you we were playing pre-cons, and you brought out the elf deck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember that that day. Your other guy, he was playing Bosch, and you played dinosaurs.
Yeah, my very first inclination of dinosaurs. And
Yeah,
at that point, I still didn't really know what I was doing with deck building. So the thing
yeah,
was not optimized at all, and the curve was horrible.
yeah. The really disgusting bit is that this version of Elves is upgraded from what that deck
Oh
was.
yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
As your decks should over time
Yeah,
upgrade.
like as you play it and you get comfortable with it, like start it out and you can start out at whatever stage you want to. Like no one's saying go out there and spend $400 on a deck like I did, right? Like this elf deck, and I'm sure other decks that you have too, Nick. We accrued them over time,
Oh,
right?
without a doubt.
Like if you look at this list here, this list is like 4 years in the making, right? So I didn't just build this overnight. Some of these decks that you really want to put your heart and soul into, and you want to put your time into, it's a growing thing, right? You're gonna build into it. You're gonna put some time and effort over the course of a few years to kind of build your, I'm gonna say pet deck, right? Like, what's your pet deck?
um, right now it's my Urtai deck, but it's bounces back and forth between Urtai and uh Miram. But like for
That's
me,
fair.
because I try not to play my Urtai too much because it is a mean deck.
Right,
Um,
that's same here with this one, yeah.
I mean, obviously we've talked about it before. My Urtai deck is stacks centric. Um, so I try not to play it too much, which has caused my Miram deck to kind of be pushed to the forefront as I would say it's my number two deck in terms of power. And how like if I'm keeping track of my win totals,
Right.
my Miram deck has more wins than my Urtai deck. But my Urtai deck, I fuck with the table a lot more, and I cause everyone else to
Right.
struggle. But
Well, that's like
realistically, yeah, go ahead.
in a control deck versus a more streamlined aggro deck.
Oh, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I know if I'm playing against someone and I want to do a quick game, I'm pulling out
Mm-hmm.
Miram. Like
Yep.
I'm not pulling out Urtai in because that game's gonna last forever if I draw the right cards. Whereas Miram,
Right.
I could potentially win turn 5 or 6 depending on what cards I draw. And I purposely right now don't have any tutors in this deck or any ways to search for cards because I could end up getting stuff out a lot quicker. And I don't necessarily want that at this point.
Right.
But the
But yeah,
one,
that's nothing
yeah,
wrong with that.
yeah, the one deck I will say is probably my pet deck. Right now, I'm in the process of rebuilding it completely because I took it apart a few years ago, and it was the deck I played the most of. Is my elf deck, my Golgari elf deck, and you know exactly which one I'm talking about.
Yep.
And at the time when I had it built, I didn't really know too much of what I was doing with it. And for those that do not know, I am talking about Nath of the Gilt Leaf. So, Nath, he was my second attempt of building a deck myself. And he is a 3 and a black and a green for a 4/4 elf warrior. And he reads at the beginning of your upkeep, you may have target opponent discard a card at random. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you may create a 1/1 green elf warrior token. So, when I first built him, I built it more as an elf ball style deck. And I just put a bunch of freaking elves in there. I didn't really understand synergies or anything like that. And as I'm
Right.
sitting here and I've been working on rebuilding it and trying to figure out how I want to do it, Nath can be a disgusting discard style deck and focusing on having everyone else discard their cards while you're just amassing an army. So,
Yeah, 100%. Like, yeah,
yeah, so I'm in the
it's really
process of
good.
rebuilding him right now because I've been itching to play him. Because, I mean, I was originally going to make what the hell's her name? She was the mono black from Kaldheim. Turgid. Or
Oh,
Turgrid.
Turgrid, yeah, that one is yeah, people don't like that one.
Yeah, I
If
was
you want to
gonna.
talk about having a high salt score, that thing's salt is like there's the Dead Sea and then there's that bitch's salty ass.
Yeah, I mean, I was originally gonna build her up as my discard style deck, but then I'm like, you know what? I like playing the game a little bit too much, and I don't want to be an asshole. So I think NAF is a nice little common ground,
Yeah,
but
it's cool that he's a unique one too, because like, so I know we're recommending EDHREC to be used by a lot of people and like to go in to check that out. If you have an idea for a tribe or something like that, you can just kind of type it in like elves. Right now, I just kind of went in and looked it out. Funny enough, Nath is very low on the usage chart here for that. Like he's got less than 700 decks
oh yeah, for Elf
built
Tribal.
for him for elves, yeah. Which makes him a really fun kind of niche guy that most people don't see a lot and usually won't see coming. So, you don't always have to run with like, I mean, if you see Lathril, Blade of the Elves, she's got over 20,000 decks built for her.
Yeah,
Which is like she's the top tier elf ball commander, as she's a 2 and 2 black or 2 and a black and a green elf noble. She has menace, which that's pretty good. And whenever she deals damage, you make that many elf tokens. And then you can tap her, tap 10 elves, and then each opponent will lose 10 and you'll gain 10. So she is an absurdly good elf commander, which explains why she's got over 20,000 decks built around her.
yeah. I mean, for those people that actually know me, they know I don't necessarily like going out and building the most popular commander. Granted,
Right.
I have a Miram deck.
Yeah, which,
But
like, Miram is good, but, like, you can like Miram. There's nothing wrong with using the top stuff. Like, we're not saying it's, you can definitely use the top stuff.
like I know for
But you don't
me,
have to.
when that set came out that Miram was in, I saw her spoiled, and I immediately started brewing because
100%, yeah.
I saw how
So-
broken she could be. And
Yep.
from that set, I actually wasn't expecting her to be the top commander from that set at all.
Yeah, I think it took a lot of people by storm.
Cause shit, who was that other person in that set that oh shit. Well, she was Baldur's Gate, right?
Yeah, that was the, or Adventures in the Far Realms, something like that.
Let's see. I'm just pulling this up real quick because now I'm interested because I can't remember. Let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Was it Baldur's Gate? Or Adventures in the Far Realms?
It was one of those. I don't think it was Baldur's Gate. I think it was Adventures. It was definitely their
Yeah.
D&D set for sure.
Yeah, it was Adventures in Baldur's Gate there. But looking at the top commanders from Adventures, I mean, you got Miram at just over 22,000. And the next closest one is Captain Nagathrod. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. But from the pre-con set. But when I was looking at it, I saw cards like Glunch, the Bestower, and I'm like, ooh, that could be a fun card. And then
Yeah, Lunch is really cool.
yeah. And I actually made I have an Asterion, the Decadent deck. That's a lot of fun.
We love Astarion.
But
He's so good.
yeah. But back to topic. When I first built my Miram deck, I had no idea she was going to be that popular. And
Right,
it
which,
kind
like,
of
you're just getting it start there. You don't know.
Yeah, and it kind of went against my rules that I gave myself of don't build something
Right.
that is super popular. Because I want to go to a table and people be like, oh, what's that one? I've never seen that before.
Right.
And it goes right along lines of some of my other decks. And
Yep.
especially like my theft deck that I have. Um with Yasova.
Yep.
A lot of people, especially in today's climate, they don't really see a lot of Yasova being played.
No, they really don't. Not when it comes to like theft centered. You usually see more like Sultai or Esper.
Yeah,
Commanders like white, blue, black, or blue, black, green. Commanders like the new Gonti precon that just came out. You usually see something along those lines when you picture a theft deck. So seeing a Yusova pop out is like a really cool kind of niche thing. That's like, well, that's a really fun thing to see. I've never saw that before. I like that.
yeah, exactly. And I kind of like bringing that to the table.
Yep.
And of course, I like having my decks that are gonna win, as does
Of
everybody.
course. Well, yeah. I mean, the whole point of the game is to win. So
So, of course, there's always been some commanders that I've looked at. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That could be badass. And then I actually look at their abilities, and then I start doing more research, and I'm like, oh shit. Well, this newer card can do the same thing with
yep.
less mana cost, and it has ward or it has something else. So I'm
Right. Like
like,
it can do
yeah,
things more efficiently. It can do stuff like that. Because I've even been asked, like when I bring out Azuri to the table for elf stuff, like even look at him, he's got less than 3,000 decks. Like nobody, not that many people build Azuri when it comes to elf decks. They all like to build Lathril, or if they're doing mono green, they use Marwyn, the Nurturer, who
yep,
gets bigger and then makes mana equal to her power. Like every time an elf comes in, she gets bigger, and then she taps for all that mana, right? So she's kind of like a combo piece. But then like I'll bring out Azuri, and people be like, well, why use him? Why not use the other ones? And the reason is very simple. He's a mana sink.
yep.
He's got the two abilities, the one green, regenerate another elf, so he can't save himself, but he can save my other elves from a board wipe. And then his other one is 3 green, give my elf creatures +3/+3 and trample. With the amount of mana that an elf deck can make in mono green, I've been able to use that ability at least 4 times in a turn.
Oh,
So,
without a doubt.
like, having a way to win the game on the spot in the command zone, that's why I use Azuri. Because I can just build my elves, keep playing them, don't have to worry about my commander, and I just play Azuri when the time is right. I don't need him in play to actually get the game going on my end.
Exactly. And on with that aspect, that brings another little aspect of deck building that you can think about. Your commander, it doesn't need to be on the field. If especially nowadays, if your deck requires your commander to be on the field to do anything, in my opinion, you're doing something wrong. Um, there's very few instances where I would say, nope, I can't do anything unless my commander is out. But how I look at deck building now is, especially with how much targeted removal there is and how much BS there is now, you want to be able to still play the game without your commander on the field. I mean, I don't know your thoughts about that, but I try and build it so I can still win without ever casting my commander.
There are definitely decks that you can do that with, and I would say if you're looking for a deck to build around that style of, like, I don't need to have the commander on the board to, like, it's a key piece. Like, the commander definitely has a role to play, for sure, as the commander should. Like, it's the reason you chose the commander was for a theme or a cool bit to do something unique. But I would definitely agree that, like, it is a interesting way to play the game where your commander can just sit in the command zone for half the game, and then you play them at the opportune moment to either close the game out or just excel yourself even further beyond where you were.
Oh, exactly. And
Which is a very valid strategy to build around if you want to go that route.
yeah, I mean, there's plenty of cards out there that can do that as a commander. But with that, what do we got coming up? What are our plans?
So, for the future, let me see. I was thinking about this earlier today, actually. And now I'm having a brain fart.
Like, I know we talked about deck building a little bit today.
Yep, so like getting into deck building, getting into that. There was one other thing I did want to kind of touch on briefly. Was so like I know we were talking about building decks from scratch, right? Like looking into starting a deck from the ground up. Like here's your foundation, build from that, from scratch. You don't always have to do that. In fact, I would usually actually recommend for brand new players, look around at the precons. We've had over 10 some years of precons being released. You know, decks that have been already built, and they've just gotten better over the years.
Oh,
So,
God. Some of these new precons are better than
right?
the decks that we were playing when we first started playing EDH.
Oh, 100%. So, and there's some that are actually pretty cheap. Like, you can find a really good precon for like 40 to $50. So, like, you know, don't look at our decks that we've built and see that huge price tag of like $400 to $600. Like my sliver deck's like $600.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you don't have to spend that amount, right? You can go to Walmart, you can go to Target, go to a local game store, look at their precons. They're usually from around $40 to $60, and you can play them right out of the box. Get some sleeves. So I'd say you could probably spend at least like maybe $80 for precon deck, sleeves, and a playmat, and you'll be good to go, right? Like you don't have to spend the hundreds of dollars that we've spent over the past 12, 15 years.
Oh, exactly.
In our Magic careers.
And you could easily, there's sites out there that'll tell you, especially Command Zone, they're one of the best at doing it. And they'll take those precons that are released every set, and they'll tell you, these are what you should do to upgrade this and make it better. And
oh yeah, I love their upgrade stuff.
oh yeah,
it's really good.
It's great. And you can sit there and figure out, okay, well, these upgrades are going to cost me an extra $20. Well, now you can go to your local game store or go to a site like TCG Player or any of the other various ones. Card Kingdom is very good as well.
Yeah, I would say Card Kingdom over TCG.
Yeah.
That's just me, though.
I've had issues with both, so I don't sway either way. But I highly recommend going to your local game store first if it's feasible.
Yeah, game store is good. Yep.
Keep these guys in business.
Yeah, support your local game store, folks. They're good.
But for the $20-$30, you can upgrade that deck, and now it's more powerful. And especially when you're just starting out and you don't know what you like, why go spend $300 to $400 on a deck just to find out, I don't really like how this plays. Or I don't like frickin' doing an aggro style deck. It doesn't make sense to me. And I highly recommend, especially for those that are learning how to play the game, go on to Arena. Sit there on Arena, play some games. You could play, what the hell do they call their commander format on Arena there?
It is Historic Brawl, I believe. Or just like Historic something or other.
Yeah.
Which, that's a good way to just kind of get the mechanics of the game down.
I mean, Christ. Historic Brawl, it's pretty good on Arena. Like, I've tested some deck ideas out on there, see if it will work. The only issue is they lack a lot of the older cards.
Right, so like your card pool is going to be smaller, and they don't start you at 40 life.
Yeah, you start at 20.
They start you at 25.
Or 25, I think.
Yeah, but they do give you that 100-card deck.
Yeah.
So, like, you build the 99 with the commanders +1, which we probably actually should have led with that. It's like, yeah, your deck is going to be 99 cards, and then 100 when you equal the commander.
Singleton.
Even though the commander's not in the main deck. Oh, Singleton, too. Yeah, my God, we got so into our one topics that we completely forgot. Yeah, only one card type of the things. You can't play more than like one Elvish Mystic that I have. I can only play one Elvish Mystic. But lands are good to go. Basic lands, play as many of those as you want.
Yeah, I was just gonna say basic lands are the exception.
Yep.
Named lands, like I have
Yeah, so
one
like
sitting on my
non-basic.
I have one sitting on my desk right now. Silent Clearing.
Yep.
It's
Only
from
one.
the original Modern Horizons. You can only have one in your deck.
Yep.
But
yeah, Arena's a very good place to kind of get the feel for it and understand like the mechanics of the game itself too. Is really good for that.
Yes. But with that, we're gonna call this a day. We appreciate you guys all listening to us ramble on.
Always a good time.
As always, I'm Kava.
This is Jack signing out.
And we will talk to you guys all later.
Bye.